What's up, guys? We have the always wonderful Mr. Barry Krauss. Finally get to meet you virtually, of course, in good old 2020. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, man. Of course. Chat 10 Sports was happy to have you. Our wonderful friend and one of Chattanooga's best trainers, Lisa Blevins,
Love
introduced us.
Lisa.
Oh, man,
Yes.
she's awesome. She was
Yes,
awesome.
she is.
We were talking the day, and I was breathing heavy, working off a little uh, Thanksgiving LBs, if you will, and I was breathing hard, and she was like, "Hey, you've got a podcast?" I was like, "I do." She's like, "I've got somebody for you to meet," and here you are.
Have you ever done her class?
Oh yeah, that's actually how I met your stepson Nick. Was me and Nick were the guys in
Oh,
the back huffing
okay.
and puffing.
Yeah,
So
I was just gonna say if you survived that, that's pretty good.
yeah, she really introduced me a lot. I loved her style of class, and it's
hmm
kind of taken me in different directions as far as fitness goes. So she's awesome.
hmm
So
Totally agree.
yeah, she's a good one. But man, we'll just fire away here. We'll go timeline. You had an awesome resume as far as who you've coached or who you've been coached by, your career. So start us out with some high school years, because it seems like you had a pretty fun time down there in South Florida.
Yeah, I was. My parents came down from Chicago in 1955. They bought this house in a place called Pompano Beach, which is north of Fort Lauderdale.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, I played all the poor man sports, baseball and football. Golf, which I play all the time now. I wish I would have been able to do that, but that's just not where, my family was at that time. So I love football and I love baseball, and
Yeah.
just every day playing in the front yard, and just, and it's really kind of cool when you look back on it. It's like, my dream as far as as an athlete, it was to make the big play, make that shot. If it's a 3-pointer in basketball or catch the ball, I used to jump over hedges in the front yard, catching a football, and trash the
Yeah.
hedge. And I always loved athletics and sports and always competition. So, fast forward to high school football, I played baseball my junior year and then ended up, quitting that and just really focusing on track and football. And the track really helped me. It really has helped me. And over the years, that's one of the. I had a young man here in Chattanooga. I think he was a senior at CCS, and he was asking. He's a linebacker, and he goes, "Okay, what can you tell me? What can you tell me? You played in the NFL 13 years. You played for Alabama. What would you
Oh yeah.
advise me?" And I said, "Well, it's all about speed. It's about angles, and I said, work on your speed and so forth." So I always did that. I was always fast. And so, but I was small up until my senior year. And that summer, I went from 5'10", about 185 pounds, to 6'3", about 210. Over the
Solid growth
summer.
spurt.
I had growth spurts, yeah. And all of a sudden, I had all these colleges knocking at the door. I mean, I had University of Florida there at the practices, FSU, Miami, almost every day. They were like constantly recruiting me because I was a big linebacker. I was as big as maybe the offensive lineman that made All-State that year. And so I got recruited by Auburn, Notre Dame, Oklahoma State. Who else was there? Georgia Tech. Came down to Georgia Tech and Alabama. And the reason why I chose Alabama was kind of crazy, is that I had a buddy of mine. His name's Eddie Blankenship, and he's from. I jokingly say he's from L.A., but it's actually Lower Alabama.
Oh yeah.
It's called Muscle Shoals, and he and his mother lived right on a street called Bryant Avenue in Pompano Beach, right off of the beach. So every weekend I'd go down there and we'd play football. We'd toss the football, and it was so cool. But he was a big Alabama fan, so he kind of introduced me to Alabama football. And we used to run the wishbone against the waves. I don't know if you've
Oh
even
man.
thought about that.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, so we used to do that. And so when Alabama came knocking at the door, I said, "Shoot, man, wow, I'd love to play for Alabama, play for Coach Bryant."
Oh yeah.
And so came down to Georgia Tech because I liked architecture. And then I chose Alabama. And I'll never forget one of the big motivating factors that has been motivating throughout my life is that my best friend in high school, after I had committed to Alabama, he looked at me and he said, "Why would you choose Alabama?" He says, "You're not good enough." And I'm like, "I'm not good enough." He goes, "No." He goes, "Man, those guys are good." And I went, "Okay," because I don't know why I ever thought I was good enough to play at Alabama. I have no idea. You're playing football, you're playing a sport, and you think you're pretty good. And so I thought I was pretty good. Then I went to Alabama my freshman year, and it was just almost a devastating year for me. I was homesick. I would say 80-90% of all the players at Alabama at that time were recruited out of Alabama, not
Yeah.
Florida. So I was an outcast. I mean, I had no really chance of making the team. So it was pretty brutal. Where I was basically blocking material. And we used to, yeah, as freshmen, they used to bring us out an hour before the varsity. And then when the varsity came out, they put these thing called zoot suits on us. So we got full pads, and it was this catcher's kind of vest, and would go all the way down the front of your body. And they called them zoot suits. And you kind of wallowed around. And the whole idea was to let the offensive linemen and running backs cut you. You're supposed to let them hit you and cut you. And I'm like, I don't like this. This is not cool. So I started after a while getting cut all the time. I'm like, I think this sucks. So I started dodging guys and all this, and they'd start yelling at me. Well, what are you doing? You're supposed to let me cut you. I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not. So kind of battled through that. Let's see. Okay. Battled through my freshman year. And then my sophomore year, I guess Coach Bryant saw something in me. But Coach Bryant, I don't know how much detail you want in this interview, because I can get in depth.
Fire away. That's probably the main thing. These people love to hear about the Bear Bryant experience. You're taking me away here. Yeah, fire away.
But at Alabama, Coach Bryant always wanted to remind you what your pecking order was, okay? Whether you were a starter, second team, or bottom feeder. I was a bottom feeder my freshman and sophomore year. It was an honor to wear the red jersey during practice. That means you were a starter. If you were on offense, I think it was the Greens were second team. And on defense, second team was blues. On third team defense was orange. Well, guess what color I had? I had orange. I was at the bottom of the – and so but Coach Bryant saw something in me, and so he put me on special teams. And a lot of people asked me because I have my number in the Sugar Bowl was number 77. And back then you had to be a 70 number to play tackle on the punt team. So you had 50s on center, 60s as guards, and 70s as that's what they used to do. Now it's all whacked out.
Yeah.
So they ended up giving me number 77. So I was a tackle on the punt team. I was on the kickoff. I did all special teams. And that's how I made my, earned my right to stay on this football team. And then just so happens, as many people will know that ever played, Joe Namath, Kenny Stabler, these guys, these famous guys would all tell you that there was a time and a place where Coach Bryant would check your oil, basically, find out whether you got the guts to perform. He always believed that each and every one of us had a little quitter that was on our shoulder, and he wanted to find that quitter, and he wanted to push that envelope. He really did. He wanted you to quit on him in practice because he didn't want you to quit on him in a game. So he made practices so brutal. I mean, we were 2.5 hours in full pads in the morning and afternoon, tackling drills. There was also a fact that we were not allowed water breaks. So there was no water breaks. Yeah.
Yeah. So totally different times as far as like nutrition and stuff in colleges now. I mean, they're getting Fiji waters fed out there and everything else. Totally different.
They're babied. Oh my God. I mean, I could have played another like 20 years if I would have been where these kids are, because they only practice an hour and a half in practice. Well, we used to have 2 to 3 hours. Coach Bryant used to have these schedules and would say 25, 25, and then these things called no time, no time. Well, those things could happen until 8 o'clock at night. We'd be still tackling and doing all this stuff. So our trainer was an interesting gentleman. His name was Jim Goostrey, and Jim Goostrey, we all agreed that he had no medical background whatsoever. He just was
around.
A friend of Coach Bryant, and he gave him a job, and because every time we go to him and say, okay, look, I remember one time I bruised myself, and I said, oh my God, look at this, and he goes, well, go on over there and put some ice on it. Put some ice on it, and then get back in the drill. Or, I'd say, I dislocate my shoulder. Went over to him and I said, hey, my shoulder is hurting. He goes, well, what'd you do? And I said, well, it hurts when I do this. And he goes, well, don't do that. And that's all he would say. And then you go get back into practice. Yeah. So I jumped in a hole my freshman year, and a guy named Johnny Davis ran me over. Johnny Davis ended up playing for the San Francisco 49ers. Won a Super Bowl, and Johnny was a fullback in the wishbone. I don't know if you've ever seen a wishbone, but he was that big fullback. He never lost a yard at Alabama. Just kind of give you an idea.
That's an incredible stat.
Yeah, he would just So God, when he made him, he forgot to give him a neck. He just took his head and put him on these massive shoulders. So I jump into this hole. Here comes Johnny Davis. He hits me and just runs me right on over, and did something to me that just really I've had to live with the rest of my life, and it's called a pinched nerve. I pinched a nerve in my neck, and I got paralyzed. And I had no feeling in my arm. I was just laying there in excruciating pain. And here comes old Goostrey walking up, and he goes, what is it, son? I said, oh my gosh, I can't even feel my arm. He goes, really? Just hang on a second. He went over and got a piece of ice. He goes, here, let me rub it on your neck a little bit. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, you're all right. Look at that. Look at that. Your arm's coming back. Yeah, you feel better? Good. Now get back in that drill. Go back in that tackling drill. I'm like, oh my gosh. So that was, it was really interesting. It was the mentality that Coach Bryant and the staff, we all had, what I learned to develop was leadership and no excuses. You're not going to miss a play. When I got in the NFL, I tried never to miss a play. In fact, the only time I missed a play is when I got hurt my knee. But it was about becoming the best that you can be every day, bringing it on, and with the whole thought process of, why are you here? You're here to become a good man. Coach Bryant was one asked. He says, "What do you think about coaching?" He goes, "Well, I don't coach players." He goes, "I coach kids. I coach kids into growing up into men." And that's the thing that he would do. He was always very philosophical. He'd read before practice Woody Hayes' comments, or these other great coaches, and how they looked at life. And I kind of fast forward. He always talked about there's going to become a time and a place in your life, whether it's on the football field or off the football field, where your back is to the wall. It's fourth quarter and it's fourth down, and you got to step up. You got to find the guts to step up and make it happen. And so it just so happens that my sophomore year, got through that, got into my senior year, and then we're playing for a national championship against Penn State, and that's exactly what happened. We were up 14-7. We're playing the number one team in the country. They were undefeated, the only undefeated team, 19-0. Joe Paterno and Penn State, and it came down to fourth and an inch. And nowadays you can see it on YouTube. They called timeout, and I just remember that we got in the huddle. And this is for a national championship. This wasn't just to win the SEC or to beat Auburn or anything like that. I mean, this is a national championship.
This is storybook stuff.
Yeah. And we talked about it in the huddle. I said, man, this is what Coach Bryant talked about. We got to find a way to make this happen. Got to make this happen. And so when it happened, everybody did their jobs. Defensive line surged, and then the running back came over the top, and I hit him, and we stopped him short of the goal line. We ended up winning the national championship. And I was voted most valuable player of the Sugar Bowl. And it's the first time a defensive player in 75-year history ever won the Most Valuable Player award. And so I jokingly say that's one for the ugly guys, because defense, we're ugly. All the pretty boys go to the offense. So
they're always on the beautiful long flows.
So when people ask me about that, so what was that about? And I said, that's exactly the epitome of what Alabama football was. Coach Bryant talked about winning a national championship every day. He talked about, getting into coming to a place in your life or on the goal line where you're going to have to step up. And that's exactly what we did. We rose to the occasion and stopped them and won a national championship. And it propelled me into the NFL, I truly believe, as a number 1 draft pick, and ended up playing, into my 13th year. So it was a thrill, but it all started at Alabama, and Coach Bryant, I just can't thank him enough. The influence that he's had on my life is just incredible.
Yeah, he's had that profound effect on so many guys. That's all they talk about. It's like him, and they talk about how he created them into men and teaching them different little values. And just a special guy, because obviously he's a legend, and everybody in the SEC knows about it. And I mean,
there's a story behind that too.
Far away.
A quick little story. In 1964, Alabama wins the national championship. In 65, they won a national championship. And in 66, they were the only they finished the season as the only undefeated team in the country at 11-0. But Notre Dame won the national championship that year. They went 10-0-1. They were in a bowl game against Michigan State, and Ara Parsegan went for the tie. And they end up winning the national championship only because back then they did not count the bowl games as a win or a loss. So
really?
My point is that we would have had 3 consecutive national championships back then. And the same thing happened in 1977. We were number 3 in the country, and it was Texas and Earl Campbell were number 1. Mm-hmm. Number 2 was Michigan. Alabama was 3. And I'm not sure who was 4, and 5 was Notre Dame, and 6 was Ohio State. For some reason, they matched us up with Ohio State, who's number 6 in the country. We beat them 35-6, dominated them. Yeah. Michigan loses. Texas loses to Notre Dame, and we're going, oh my God, we won a national championship, 1977, right? You would think. No, they Notre Dame leapfrogged us from 5th to 1st and won a national championship.
Yeah, because your only loss that year was it was a top 10 Nebraska team, I think they wound up being. Yeah, right. Blew out. Yeah, had a bunch of blowouts. Beat a good USC team. I think that USC team wound up. I mean, at the time they're like ranked. I think they were 1 when you guys played them.
They
Monster
were.
match.
That's right. We beat them out in California. We beat them, right? And then the next year, here we go again. 1978, we beat the number 1 team in the country, and so that would have been our 2nd national championship. And then after I got drafted in 79, Coach Bryant in 1979 season, mine was a 78 season. We played the Sugar Bowl January 1st, 1979. Mm-hmm. But the season of 79, I wasn't there, and they went undefeated and beat Lou Holtz in Arkansas. So they would have won 3 national championships if it wasn't for Notre Dame again defying us. The 3, yeah. So it's a great history. I mean, there was, when I look back on it, it was just the biggest part was just an attitude of excellence. Every day we were, we had to prove that we had the right to go out on that football field, and so we had to represent our mamas and dads. That's what Coach Bryant always talked about. He told us always to call your mama. He goes, just call her. And so we would do that. He'd get really upset if you didn't. And so it was just such a learning experience, and then becoming something bigger than us, which was a team aspect of coming together at the right place at the right time and winning a national championship.
It was awesome. Yeah. I mean, and you talked about the play. I mean, the goal line stand is one of those that you see on a bunch of highlight films. And I know a lot of Alabama fans love to post about it and do a lot of cool pictures. And that picture of you, the 77 coming into the goal line, kind of a big deal. But I know you've talked about it before in other places. It's kind of propelled you into you were the number 6 pick in that Nick, that draft in '79 to what was the Baltimore Colts. And man, you look at that draft, you had some okay players, Phil Simms, a guy named Joe Montana. There were some all right guys in that draft too, which a little different. You there?
Yeah, O.J. Anderson.
Oh, yeah.
O.J. Anderson was the most valuable player of the Super Bowl for the Giants.
Yeah.
Great football player. Yeah, it was a kind of a bittersweet thing to get drafted that high. In retrospect, I would have liked to have been drafted maybe second or third round to maybe a better organization at the time. And you're seeing that I'm wearing my Baltimore Colt thing. But there was a lot of turmoil when I came into Baltimore. The owner was at odds with the community. He was at odds with the mayor there because Edward Bennett Williams, who was the owner of the Baltimore Orioles, and along with Bob Irsay, neither one of them wanted to pay for the renovations on this Memorial Stadium.
Yeah.
And the mayor just said, "I'm not doing it." So that's one of the reasons why the Colts ended up leaving in 1984.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got in there, Ted Marchibroda was the head coach, and they had won the AFC East in 75, 76, and 77. 78, they posted a losing season, which gave them the number one pick, which was me. So when I came on there, there was just a lot of personal problems. The team lacked a lot of character. There weren't good quality guys on the team. It was just and then so they ended up firing Ted Marchibroda after that first year, and then hired a guy named Mike McCormick, and they fired him. All sorts of I had 6 different head coaches in the first 7 years of my career with the Colts. We
exhausting.
did not. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's like, no matter what we did, and that's tough because when you change a head coach, you change a defensive coordinator, you change a whole system and the verbiage and the philosophy and everything. And so we were relearning. We had no time to win. We just didn't have the right components to win. We didn't have the right coach. I'll never forget Mike Singletary when he was with the Bears. They had been losing, and they finally fired the coach again. And all of a sudden, this guy named Mike Ditka walks into the meeting room, and he said, "Hey guys, you don't know me, I don't know you, but let me tell you this: you follow me, you stay with me, and we work together, and we will win a Super Bowl. We'll win a world championship." And guess what? That came true. I had never had a head coach in the NFL walk into the room and say, "Hey, we're going to win a Super Bowl." Never had one. But when I was in college, that's all Coach Bryant talked about was winning a national championship. That's what you do. You're right. So it was pretty tough. And then we had no such thing as free agency in the NFL. No one knew what anybody was being paid. They kept everything very close to the vest. So,
did you have an agent at the time, or?
Yeah, I had an agent, but there's no negotiate. There was not much to negotiate with. How do you negotiate when you have no leverage?
Yeah, there's no market.
No leverage. You didn't know what Billy was playing or how much he was making with the Denver Broncos that made half my tackles or half this.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just one of those things that was just really tough time. And then after 10 years, I took a shot at playing for the Cleveland Browns. I played for a guy named Bud Carson, who was one of my favorite coaches. Bud was the defensive coordinator for the Steelers when they won 4 Super Bowls. With the Jack Lambert and Jack Ham and all these great
legendary team
players. Yeah, and he was our coach, and he became the head coach of. If I could find my thing, he became the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. So he invited me to play there. I did, but it didn't work out. He ends up cutting me, which is, one of the most really toughest parts of an athlete or a professional athlete to come to terms with. Maybe it's time and it's over. Everything that you've worked for, maybe you're too old, whatever.
Mhm.
But I didn't believe that. I thought I was in really good shape. And so I was really disappointed that, I was not, I lost my little thing. So I ended up getting cut from Bud. Just didn't work out after training camp, which is the worst time you want to, because all your rosters are already set for the year in September.
And there's no Twitter to let people know that you're cut, and it's totally different.
Yeah, it was. And so I ended up getting cut. And I remember loading up a U-Haul and traveling from Cleveland to Columbus, Ohio, and then cut back to Indianapolis, where I had a house there. And I remember I was emptying my U-Haul the next morning around 7 a.m. and the phone rings. And, I didn't really want to answer it, but I did. And it was the guy said his name was Don Shula. And I'm like,
That's not.
yeah, sure. Don Shula's, like Don Shula's going to really call me. It's like, no, this is Coach Shula, and we'd like you to come down and play for the Dolphins. I'm like, really? Really? And he goes, well, let me put somebody on, and his name was George Hill. Well, George Hill was the defense coordinator for Woody Hayes in Ohio State for years, then became our defense coordinator with the Colts. And so I knew the scheme that he ran, which was a matchup zone type of defense. And it was Bud Carson. I mean, George, whatever his name is. Now I can't remember his name. George. But anyway, George says, Barry, he goes, this is true. And I said, this is really Coach Shula? And he goes, yes. Well, you got to understand is that I grew up in Pompano again, and I was a big Dolphin fan. So my dad would take me to Dolphin games, and I'd see Don Shula all the time. I'm like, this is so cool, So all of a sudden, I get picked up by the Dolphins. I go down there and miss about 3 or 4 games. He starts me against the Cleveland Browns.
Was your family still there?
Yeah, my family's still there. So the 5th game of the season, we're playing the Cleveland Browns. He starts me. I made every tackle. I was so motivated because they cut me. The next week was the Indianapolis Colts, and I dominated that game. So I ended up starting the last 12 games of the season, and I led the team in tackles. It was one of my greatest finishes per se.
And that was what, your 8th season?
It was my 11th.
11th, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. So I was in my 11th year, and got to play for Don Shula and the Dolphins. Oh, give me a break. So I ended up the whole part of the story is that I ended up on a high note. I finished on a high note, playing for the Miami Dolphins. I'll never forget Don Shula actually knows my name. I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, it was neat.
So even in your 11th year, like there's still like a kid star power to Don Shula.
Yeah,
that's crazy. Yeah.
Oh, he had he was the winningest coach in NFL football history, and then also Coach Bryant was the winningest coach in college football. I mean, I'm playing for 2 of the greatest coaches ever, and not too many people can say that. And what a great experience! It was kind of funny. Coach Bryant Coach Shula has just recently passed away. I think about a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And my father-in-law, who's not a big sports guy, not big one, he said he was in Highlands, North Carolina, and there he's at a restaurant, and there he said, Don Shula was over at a table. He's in a wheelchair. Oh, he's always in Naples, my wife just said. So he gets the guts up, and he said, all right, I'm going to try this. So I walked over, and he said, Coach, you don't know who I am. My name's George Petway, but my son-in-law, Barry Krauss, played for you. And he goes, oh, Barry Krauss, yes, number 55, And to my father-in-law, he goes, oh, my God, he knew you. And I'm like, yeah, he knew me. But it was kind of funny. Here's a Hall of Fame coach, and he knew Barry Krauss. So growing up in Pompano and being able to, play for Coach Bryant and then play for Don Shula, the Miami Dolphins. I mean, it's just surreal. It's wonderful.
It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, two of the greatest. I mean, Shula, especially because what's funny is my dad looks at like the way he spoke about Dawn because we went on an 8th grade trip and Shula's got all these restaurants, you know. So
Yeah.
we go to DC and we go to this. I was like, yeah, Dad, we're going to Shula's restaurant. And he was like, oh man, take all these pictures. I mean, I'm going to the monuments and all that stuff. He's like, tell me about Don Shula's place, you know? It's like cool.
Yeah.
So just a legend.
I knew I probably still remember every player that played for the Dolphins. You know, they went 17-0. You know that. They went undefeated. And
Another year.
Larry Zonka just celebrated with the Bears losing just recently. But, you know, I knew, you know, it's like Manny Fernandez. There was Nick Bonacani, Jake Scott, Paul Warfield, Larry Little. I mean, I knew all of them. Bob Greasy, Earl Morrill. Little do a lot of people know is that Bob Greasy ended up quarterbacking the Dolphins in that Super Bowl, but he was hurt I think the 4th week of the season. He was out. And a guy named Earl Morrill took him 12 consecutive wins to the Super Bowl. And to this day, I never really liked the call that Coach Shula did, but he benched him and put Greasy in. And I would have loved to see Earl Morrill, you know, be able to at least start the game, you know, because he took him 12 consecutive wins. I believe that it was what it was. But yeah, went undefeated. And so, I mean, I knew all the players' names. I met a guy named Norm Evans one time at a Christian prayer breakfast, and he was the starting right tackle for the Dolphins. And I remember looking at him, and he was like a giant. I was like, oh, my God, he's huge. He was like 6'7", about, 285 pounds. I had no idea that, I would end up playing against guys like that in the NFL. But what a cool experience.
That is cool. I got to ask you about one. Nick told me to ask a story about the move from Baltimore to Indy and you and the Mayflowers.
Yeah. When we found out that actually a buddy of mine called me and he said, Barry, he goes, the Colts are moving. I said, really? Because you got to understand that Bob Irsay had been threatening for about 3 to 4 years that he was going to move the team, and everybody in Baltimore didn't believe it.
Yeah.
And there were places called Shea Stadium, which is a baseball field that we used to play the Jets at. There was Jacksonville, Florida, Phoenix, Arizona, and I know there were I thought there were 5, and then there was Indianapolis, Indiana. So I remember his name was Pat Beach. He calls me up. He says, because we lived in apartments in a place called Morningside Heights overlooking the Colts complex. And it was a snowstorm that night. And he goes, Barry, you got to come up here, man. I think we're moving. And I'm like, why? I went over there, and they were the what they called the Mayflower trucks. And they actually are based out of Indianapolis, Indiana, the Mayflower. So they went in there, and obviously they took everything that they could. There were I think there were 4 different semis, and all of them had a task, a different route to go. Because at that time, there was a law that had not been passed. It's called eminent domain. And so they didn't believe the Colts were ever going to do it. So they were afraid that they would pass the law and stop. You can hold anything physically in the state. So each of the semis went different ways out of the state of Maryland. So if one got caught, 3 of them got away or whatever. It was kind of crazy, and they all rendezvoused on the outside. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
It sounds like a heist movie.
So the next morning, at 8 a.m. in the morning, they passed the law, but it was too late. The trucks were already out, and they, moved in the middle of the night. And they, Baltimore hates the Colts because of that. How dare they slip out in the middle of the night? But they didn't do it just to be slick, but they were doing it so that, basically they couldn't pass that law. They had to get out of there at the right time. So I remember going over there to Indianapolis, and they were just all pumped up and everything. And so I jokingly say, you know what? I came over on the Mayflower to Indianapolis to become a Colt. And You know, it was really just an incredible experience to come over there, and that was a learning curve too. I mean, all of a sudden we plopped an NFL team down where
Yeah.
there were loyal fans that were Chicago Bear fans, Cincinnati Bengal fans, Cleveland Brown fans, and all of a sudden, who? The Colts?
Yeah.
Where did this guy come from? So it took us years and years, and my teams never were good enough to really kind of reestablish until like Jim Harbaugh became the quarterback, and we almost went to the Super Bowl against the Steelers. I think it was in '94, and then a guy named Peyton Manning showed up, and that was all she wrote. I mean, Peyton
Yeah.
Manning changed the whole mentality of football in the state of Indiana. You know, when you think of Indiana, you think of basketball. You think of Bobby
Mhm.
Knight. You think of IU. Let me tell you this, it has shifted. It is not the same anymore because of Peyton Manning. Everybody got so pumped up. Peyton Manning was such a superstar. Every kid was growing up wanting to be like a Peyton Manning. It was really incredible. So for the first time ever, IU, I don't know if you watched them. I think they just recently beat Wisconsin, if
Yep.
I'm sure. They got a good football team, and their head coach now has become the highest paid I don't know if what it was a private citizen or whatever. I don't know how that goes underneath as a coach, but no one would ever step on Bobby Knight and that basketball program until now. They've moved on from that, and so football is huge in Indiana, and it's really cool to see. And but the Colts they got a great following, and I'm so
Mhm.
proud of. You know, I've been friends of Jimmy Irsay, which is the son of Bob Irsay. Um, Jimmy and I've been friends since '79, and a guy named Pete Ward as well, who's the COO. And they keep me on board, so I still broadcast for the Colts. I've done everything for them from TV, radio. I used to do TV, but they said I had a face made for radio, so I went on the radio.
They're lying to you.
So,
They're lying
so
to
I've
you.
been off and on. I've been doing that for almost 28 years. So they really allow me to be a part of the organization as you know. I think as long as I want to be a part of it, which is really cool.
Yeah, that really has grown into be one of the best programs in football. And I mean, yeah, they're still in the playoff hunt, and they're in there now, and they're another. Unfortunately, they had their quarterback, they had luck, and they were on a track to become a dynasty, and it kind of stinks. But I understand in some ways why that went down. But that's such a fantastic organization. I'm not a fan personally as a Titans guy. That's a big thing we've started up here in the Chattanooga Titans fans. We're labeled with the Titans, so it makes me feel good. But yeah, the Colts organization is something that it's crazy what it's gone from a transplant team to all of a sudden you pick up Peyton and you become this star-studded team, and now they're kind of the caliber of the AFC South. I mean, as good as Tennessee can be, and Texans have been a few times, but they're always still like, if you're going to win it, you got to go through Indianapolis. So it really is funny to see what IU basketball and even the Pacers. I mean, when the Reggie Miller years were insane. So those are some passionate fans too. So pretty cool to see what's like changing over to a football team or a football state in a lot of ways.
This year is phenomenal. But you know, again, you kind of made a comment as far as Andrew Luck. We had him for years, and unfortunately, um, uh, the general manager for the Colts at that time just did not support and surround Andrew Luck with everything that he needed, and he didn't
Yeah.
get it. Unlike Peyton Manning did.
Yeah.
And that was Bill Polian, who was the general manager of the Buffalo Bills when they went to 4 consecutive Super Bowls and lost every one of them, but still went to 4 consecutive Super Bowls. Bill Polian built everything around Peyton Manning. I mean, you got Reggie Wayne, Edgerrin James, Joseph Adai, Jeff Saturday, the center,
Mm-hmm.
Reggie Wayne from the University of Miami. I mean, just Marvin Harrison. All these
Yeah.
guys are Hall of Famers. Hall of
Yeah.
Famers. He surrounded them with the right people. It didn't happen with Andrew Luck. And I'm sorry for that, because he was a special kid, and what
Super
a
talented.
nice guy. What a nice guy. When you
Mhm.
see when you see a guy that's such a nice guy, you want him to be successful. And it just didn't come out that way. He just got beat up. I mean, he was getting
Yeah.
sacked anywhere from 45 to 50 times a year, which means he was getting hit twice as much.
Yep.
So he finally quits. And so we get this guy named Philip Rivers, who is in his 17th year. He's got 9 kids,
That
he
man.
comes out and he's still got something in the tank, and he's
Yeah.
having a really good year this year. He works. Our head coach is a guy named Frank Reich, and Reich was with the Buffalo Bills, and I played against Frank. He was the backup to Jim Kelly when they went to the Super Bowls, and he just fits in perfect, and he's really coming into his. I think everybody's coming together. So the Colts right now are 9-4. Yes, they
Mhm.
lost to Tennessee a couple weeks ago,
Yep.
and there's no excuses for it, but we lost our 2 big defensive linemen.
That was a
That
big key.
Yeah, we have a guy named DeForest Buckner, and we traded a number 1 draft pick this year for him from San Francisco. And let me tell you this, he is incredibly
Mhm.
talented he's 6'8", about 320 pounds, and he can move. I mean,
Just a
he
monster.
makes plays down the line of scrimmage. He makes plays behind this. He 2 weeks ago he had 2 sacks and like 2 or 3 tackles from behind the line of scrimmage. Phenomenal athlete, but a guy that's what they call a 3 technique. He's over that guard center gap. And let me tell you, that's a big part of Tennessee's running game, is kind of
Mhm.
cutting it up in there, and then breaking it back outside. And I give all the credit to Henry. I mean, he's a great football player. He's just a freak. He's just like
Yeah.
he rushed for 178 yards against us without Buckner and Autry.
Trench.
They were
Yeah.
both Autry was out with COVID. So
Mhm.
we've got another rematch coming up, sooner than later. But right now, it's like we got the Houston Texans. Sunday, which was an awesome game, we played the Raiders in Las Vegas,
Yeah.
and the Colts for the last 2 to 3 weeks have shut out everyone in the second half, and we were able to shut out Derek Carr again. So the organization has really come around. Again, it starts at the top. Jimmy Irsay supporting the general manager, was a guy named Chris Ballard, and then he supports the head coach. So been able to put it together. And but Tennessee has the same thing: great ownership. It's got a great coach and a great football team, and they love to run the ball, don't
They do,
they?
man. They
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
That, and they can
So
turn that into some awesome play action. So,
yeah, they do. Yeah. And I love the story of the quarterback was with the Dolphins,
mhm.
and he just couldn't make it. Remember that? It was about 5 or 6 years there. He bombed, and he comes to Tennessee, and all of a sudden he just fits perfectly in there. Right system at the right time.
It's funny. Yeah. And who I'm blanking. Jets head coach now, Gase.
Gase.
It's a product of the Gase effect. I hate to say that, but it really shows, because Tannehill is a good quarterback, and we were all afraid that, when he and Mariota were both there, it's like it's the same guy, but it's not. It's not. Unfortunately, he had those years with Gase, and I really do feel like he's in the right system. We're also Tennessee's also building around him and Henry, and we've got 2 really solid receivers. I mean, I think AJ is going to be a star, and
Yeah.
it's really taken off in the right ways. So this is going to be a fun couple of years between the Colts and the Titans, because it's probably going to be a division we're going to get 2 teams in every year for the next at least 3 years. So going to be impressive to see. I wanted to ask you 3 last questions. Number 1, who's the toughest? It can be a quarterback, lineman, running back. Who's the toughest guy you ever played against, college or pro?
I would say the toughest guy I ever played against would be pro was John Hanna. I don't know
John
if you know
Hanna.
John Hanna, but he's in the NFL Hall of Fame. I mean, he played for Alabama. I
Yeah.
played with 2 brothers, Charlie, who played for Tampa Bay, and then also David Hanna. But John Hanna was one, if not the best offensive lineman ever in the history of the NFL. Um, he didn't have a neck. He just he was a guard, and I have to hit guards. These guys
Yeah.
vicious. I mean, I'm vicious, and I remember I kind of toot my own horn on this, and we played New England Patriots early in the season, and all I did was I just strapped it up and I said, I'm selling out. I don't really care about making tackles. I'm just going to punish John Hannah by him. So we hit over and over and over, and I split his forehead open. There's a little the helmet used to come down and cut the hair. He was bleeding during the game,
Made you feel good.
Yeah, from a linebacker standpoint, it's like, yeah. And I love John Hannah. I really respect him and love him. He came up to me afterwards. He goes, "Man, I'm voting for you all pro. You're the best linebacker I've ever played against." I'm like, yeah. And
pound that chest a little bit.
Yeah. So fast forward to the Super Bowl. New England Patriots are playing the Bears.
Mm-hmm.
And during the game, John Hannah's face was bleeding in the Super Bowl. And I said, yeah, I did that. Yeah,
I did that.
I got that thing bleeding, baby. You know what I'm saying? So, but no, John Hannah was just ruthless. I mean, we used to have these sweeps and when you go on a sweep, the guard will pull and he's watching me, he's watching the linebacker, and I'm playing like a little game because I know where the running back is. He doesn't. He's trying to figure out what hole I'm going to try to cut through to make the play. And so I duck in, duck out. And he was a guy that could run sideways, and if I committed to get up in there, he could square up, which is along the line of scrimmage, better than anybody else. He'd hit you square, boom, and he'd just knock you on your butt, which he did. He knocked me on my butt. I knocked him on the butt. It was like a battle. It was brutal. Yeah. So one of the best ones, the great running backs are Walter Payton, Tony Dorsett, Earl Campbell, Eric Dickerson, all of those guys, and Barry Sanders. They all had different running styles.
Yeah.
I remember I was playing in Soldier Field, and I had Walter Payton out of the backfield. They threw a little flare pass, and I'm one-on-one with him. He catches the ball, and he does this little high step and crap and all this stuff. And I ended up tackling him, bringing him down. Oh. And he gets up and he picks me up and he goes, "It's a hell of a tackle. Great job." We ran back to the huddle. I was like, I almost couldn't breathe. I was like, "Oh my God, did I just tackle Walter Payton?" I was like, "Oh my God." I mean, Walter, he had more moves than X-Lax, man. This could make and bake. And so what a thrill that was to play against such great football players. It was just an honor.
That's awesome. Was Barry as shifty as he? I feel like I watched Barry Sanders, and I know that offensive line was brutal for years, but that man could break tackles in the backfield like nobody else.
Yeah, he was like a jitterbug. I always jokingly said, well, I got a 50-50 chance to go either way. So just pick a side one way or another. Maybe you might tackle him. Yeah, he was just really, really elusive. You had as we say, you couldn't blow him up. These guys now, you see these guys blow these guys up, bam, big hits. Can't do that you can't do it. I mean, you take a shot at him and he dodge you. Boom, you're gone. And whenever, he knew that he was going to get hit, he kind of gave with it. So you never really got a good shot on him. You always try to blow up these running backs, but he was a great one too.
He was a good one. Second one. This is a Chat 10 Sports podcast. So what's your favorite when you come back to Chattanooga? Because you're still up in Indiana, right?
Right, in Chattanooga.
Okay. But yeah, so what's your favorite restaurant here for all the people that might be venturing through?
Wow, isn't that something? Well,
I think it's a good foodie city.
I love my wife and I have a couple of them. We love Hennon's. If you like Hennon's, you ever hear of Hennon's?
Oh yeah,
we love to go there. The Hennon's family has just been really wonderful, and the gentleman that owns it, Mr. Hennon's brother, actually played for the Miami Dolphins a long time ago. So love Michelle and my wife and I love to go to Hennon's. We like St. Elmo. There's a lot of great ones. There's one right there. Oh gosh, what is it? Next to uh, what's the hotel right off of 27, right there with the gold?
The
What's it called?
Weston.
The Westin. Right there in the Westin, there's a little side road there, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a can't think of the name of the place. Whatever. There's
Mm.
a restaurant there. Are you familiar with any restaurants there?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. I'm here.
What's the one on the corner, right by the Westin? You
This
sit there.
it's the steakhouse that you're talking about.
Um,
Hmm. I can't remember.
Michelle. She left.
Yeah.
I
There'll be
remember I got
if
hit in
you
my
see the
head.
Weston, just walk down that way.
Remember, I've had so many concussions, contusions. I don't remember much.
They didn't save you guys back then. You just got up and played again.
Yeah, you did. You got a concussion and you got back up. And I jokingly always say that I've done everything to my body possible. I've broken ribs, I've broken bones, I've dislocated, I've paralyzed myself, I've had concussions,
Oh,
uh, knee surgeries, I've had 6 surgeries, all the above. And yet I feel great right now. I'm
that's
really
awesome.
blessed. I'm 60, I'll be 64 in March. And
Dang.
I swear it has something to do with the fact that I'm always active, love to play golf, love to work out. And
Yep.
at one time I did Lisa's class. I did it for a couple times, but I had to take like 2 or 3 weeks off just so I could recover from one of her classes.
Oh, she goes hard, and I'm glad it's coming back. I know it's socially
Yes,
distanced. She's doing it right, so she's one of the best.
she is
Last,
sweet.
yeah. Lastly, this coming weekend, what's your score prediction for Alabama, Florida?
Well, what do you think?
Mm,
The word is that Florida is coming with a bunch of shoes. They're going to be
that's what I've heard.
throwing shoes at the
Yellow
Alabama
shoes.
players and all the fans. Yeah. So yeah, I've got 2 Florida buddies that are just over the top, and I'm like, okay. I sent
Mhm.
him a picture of a guy fishing, and he caught a shoe, you know, and the guy just goes, "Yeah, that's really funny, Barry." And I'm like, "Well, that's what you guys do is you
That's
throw
what you got
shoes."
to do.
Yeah. So, do I predict it? What I think Alabama will win. I don't think Florida's got the game to stay with. I don't think anybody has the game to stay with Alabama. I mean, they're just good in every aspect. Special teams. They got a great quarterback. They got a great running back. They got receivers. They got a defense. Well, the defense is okay, not bad,
Okay.
but I just think it's phenomenal to look at what Nick Saban has been able to do over these years of creating this well-oiled machine where it doesn't matter whether he loses his offensive coordinator, his defensive coordinator the night before this national championship game, or he still finds a way to win. And
Always.
it's really remarkable how he recruits these great athletes to play for him. I mean, he gets all the five-star, and this is my thought on the whole thing is that when I came out, Alabama for me, college football was it. NFL was not really on TV much. We didn't really follow it. But the difference is now I think these young kids see the money, the fame when they're in high school, and they
Yeah.
say, you know what? They want to look at a college program that's going to get me to the NFL, and that's why all of a sudden it's like Nick Saban has really kind of designed his program that way that if you want to get in the NFL, you got the best chance of making the NFL if you come through Alabama.
Yeah, 100%. And these guys, and also just the way he's been able to adapt because, the defense is still solid. There's going to be, you know, drafted talent all over that field. But for him, it's adjusting to offense because Mac has turned into a quarterback that I thought, he'd be solid, he'd be good, but I watched him play and his mobility in the inside and outside the pocket, the throws he's making. I do think Tua is one of a kind, but it's not that far of a drop off from what he got. And those wide receivers are still amazing. So that team's really good. And I think it's another Clemson Alabama matchup coming up. So, and not going to rule out Notre Dame. They've looked solid too. So we'll see how that goes because this is going to be a really good year because those two teams are special, and this Alabama team continues to produce. As a Vol fan, it's just brutal to see those teams continue to produce factory. But Barry, man, I appreciate you, buddy. It's been a pleasure.
Chase, thank you.
Yeah, man. Well, Chat 10 Sports thanks you, and yeah, man, we'll be sending you all out to SEC Nation, especially this week. It's going to be a fun one ahead of the Alabama game. So thanks again, buddy.
You're welcome, Chase. Thanks for having me on.
Have a good one, man.